Welcome to We Get Work and the Year Ahead 2025 podcast series. This year, our special report and corresponding podcast series are created to help you move forward steadily, seamlessly, and successfully in a workplace law environment in persistent flux. Jackson Lewis invites you and others at your organization to experience the report's legislative, regulatory, and litigation insights in full at our website, jacksonlewis.com, or listen to the podcast series on whichever platform you turn to for compelling content.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Year Ahead podcast. Today, Laura Pearson-Scheinberg and I, the co-leaders of the Labor Relations Practice Group at Jackson Lewis, are going to address the year ahead for employers, particularly with respect to the NLRA and organizing activity and union activity that we're expecting to see in the new year with a new presidential administration. So, Laura, I think we talked about treating this as almost an Ask Me Anything episode. So we're going to ask each other questions today about what's happening and what people are expecting to see or what we're expecting to see next year. I think the first thing that a lot of folks are asking about these days is what's going to happen with the NLRB in terms of the majority. You know, we've had a Democratic majority in place solidly for the past several years. With the election, there were questions about the Democrats holding on to a majority on the board through 2026. Have there been any developments lately as of December 12th? Regarding the composition of the board in next year and in the following years?
Yeah, so a lot has happened, and McFerrin, who is the current chairman, is out as of just breaking news, and the likelihood of anyone getting confirmed from the Democratic side, given the Senate composition, is very low. And so that'll leave incoming President Trump, with 3 spots to fill on the Republican side to focus on it. 2 of those, Marvin Kaplan will take the chair seat likely on day 1. And 2 of those Republican confirmations will happen as soon as the Republican Party turns to those nominations. So as soon as President Trump makes those nominations and then they get filled and confirmed, it's just not clear as to where the NLRB will be in that agenda. So it could be anywhere from immediate, multiple days in, or it could take some time to turn to the NLRB. What we see, I think, what would be the most impactful is really the immediate change that you see with general counsel. Now, while the 5 members sitting on the board is sort of the ones who make the decisions, it's really the general counsel that decides what those priorities for enforcement are. And one of the first things they'll do is rescind the ideas through the rulemaking that they had, and moving forward with which arguments they want to do. And remember, there's a serious backlog at the NLRB. There's like thousands of cases sitting, and a lot of that has to do with the settlement rules that they encompass. So we envision that those rules will be kind of repealed back. So, Rick, I mean, a lot of us have practiced for a number of years, more than I'd like to admit. And it really does swing back and forth with the board. Which areas do you think the board will focus on first as far as cases to go after?
I think some of the big ones that they're going to go after, again, I think a lot of what you're talking about implicates the ability of the board to process the existing cases. And one of the big places where the board has been tied up is this requirement that any settlements be 100% of the available damages, and then the possibility of compensatory damages. That's making it difficult to settle cases. And there's also initiatives, formal as they appear to be, where the board is not going to accept settlements unless they include enhanced remedies that were not previously available to litigants. So I think the first thing is going to be addressed to address the backlog. The very real need to address that backlog is to start to make it easier to settle these cases. I think that's going to happen, and I think there will be a directive from the new GC to try to get the board to process and dismiss a bunch of cases so that they can move on to the docket.
I do think there's going to be a budget issue, right? So there isn't, I don't think, going to get a lot more budgets influxed into the NLRB and a lot of these agencies, given at least what Trump ran on as far as smaller government, et cetera. So I really think these agencies are going to have to do more with less, continue to do that. And I know the agency has already been strapped with lots of vacancies not being refilled once people leave. And my friends in and around the board, I've heard that they think there's going to be even more of a mass exodus, more people leaving. And then so there's going to be this fight of, yes, it'll be easier to resolve cases, but because the crazy remedies, the heightened remedies are going to go away, the 80% on the informal settlements will come back. And, the non-board settlements will have less oversight, and it'll be really whether the charging party is happy. But I think, it's going to be really interesting to see if things move, because there's going to be far less, money in the agency for them to really cover it. So it'll be interesting times for sure.
Some of the other things that may be like day one targets are going to be trying to go back to the Boeing standard on work rule scrutiny. Right now, the board has sort of a hair trigger test to determine whether or not policies would violate the act. It kind of harkens back to what was in place during the Obama administration. That's going to be something that'll get rolled back. That is, again, adding more to the board's docket. Confidentiality and non-disparagement provisions that have been found to be invalid by the current board. We are probably going to go back, independent contractor tests. Some of the things that touch sort of on the employment relationship that are not necessarily for the union, management relations parts of the board's enforcement. A lot of those things are probably going to be taken off the, sort of the board's current posture as soon as possible. Things like the quick election final rule. Again, if you want to gum up the board's processes, you make these elections take place on an expedited timetable. There's going to be some relaxation in the time periods in which the board can process those types of cases. So the elections may not be as quick as they are under the quick election rule. There might be more opportunities for litigants to actually litigate disputes over appropriate unit, so that it's really more like it was before some of this rule went into effect. But that's going to involve some change to rulemaking authority. I don't see that happening day one. That's going to be when the new majority is solidly in place, and it's going to take some time to undo it. But a lot of those sort of high profile type changes are going to be attacked pretty quickly by the new board. Again, the labor management relations aspects of the current majority's agenda and the GC's agenda, they're going to start going after those things too. And some of the key areas that we look at on the traditional unionized sector side. I think on that, Laura, there are definitely some changes to the organizing rules before we move past that too quickly. What do you see is going to happen with organizing besides maybe a change back to the older election procedures? What do you see substantively happening with elections?
Well, substantively, I think, first of all, I think organizing is going to stay, and if anything, continue to grow. And I think a lot of that is based on the fact that there is a different sentiment among younger workers towards unions that is far more positive, regardless of where they sit in the country, regardless of whether it's a red or blue state or any of those issues. So I think the level of organizing will continue to climb. And I think that, our nation is very polarized. What taught us about the latest election is how very polarized our nation is. And I think the people who didn't have their candidate get through are really left pretty frustrated. And I think the ways that we will see that is continued activism. Social justice issues will continue to rise. And because it went the other way, I think you're going to see people acting out more. I think you're going to see more strikes. I think you're going to see more activism and organizing. So sticking on the organizing thing, as far as that goes, I think we're going to continue to see both primarily in these non-traditional sectors. So I'm continuing to see a lot of petitions in tech. I'm continuing to see a lot of petitions in the restaurant and retail industry, far, far more at higher pace than in the past, 5 years, for example. It's just been a steady climb, and I think it's still continuing to grow, and I'm seeing them, on a daily basis come in. You seeing any other industries where you think that the in the coming year where you think they'll be organizing?
I think all industries are going to be susceptible. Again, the ones that typically have a workforce that's younger, more progressive, you're going to see that being fertile ground for organizing. You're going to see a lot more top-down organizing. One thing about the Trump administration coming in and the way in which they ran their campaign, which in a lot of ways endorsed sort of the working person in the U.S. and advocating for the working person. I think that is going to probably keep the president more supportive, if not, maybe supportive to some extent, but definitely not oppositional to strike behaviors and activity in the country. I don't think we're going to see the Trump administration or the Republicans standing on the picket line, but they may not intervene in large national strikes that we've seen, sort of like the port strikes that we saw on both coasts, and a number of the other, like the rail strike that President Biden stepped in on. You may see the Republican administration allow some of those strikes to go on for some period of time, subject, of course, to the potential impact on the economy. I think that's going to be the red line in terms of how much they are going to support strikes and not intervene. But we don't know what's going to happen because, again, the constituency of the political parties has changed somewhat as a result of this election. And that's the reason why the result was what it was. So we'll see what happens.
I think also with the election, the changes that we'll see within the agency, kind of going back to that for a moment, I think, the 21 days that we saw, those rulemaking authorities, like they can soften some of those at the regional level. So, it used to be 42 on average, then it was as soon as practicable, which was ending up being around 21. I think you're going to see that timeline climb, number one, because they're not going to have the pressure on cutting the timelines to be so heavy, and number two, because of the staffing issues. So I think once a petition is filed, you're going to see more time to run a campaign. But whether it's 21 days or 42 days, the preventative, part of it, the focus on positive employee relations, all of those pieces have to be before that petition is filed. The focus on doing what's right for the employee and focusing on the employee, not the union. I mean, that's really what we try to focus our clients to do, is focus on the employee. Tell me about what you're seeing, because you also head our co-lead our transactional practice. Where do you see things happening in the transactional side?
Well, looking at this year, the last third of the year, there's been a palpable pickup in the amount of transactional activity. So there's a lot more money being invested in acquisitions of businesses. So we're seeing a lot more of that activity, and a lot of it is going into 25 and beyond. So the deal flow seems to be moving pretty quickly. That's one big change. We're seeing a lot of plant closings, relocations of companies with unionized facilities and non-union both. And I'm seeing that in the union sector, there's a lot more call for support on plant closing in relocations. One X factor in relocations of anything that's manufactured in the U.S. is going to be the impact of potential tariffs on the manufacturing of products in other countries. So if folks are going to go to Mexico or Canada or to Asia to have products manufactured, we might see some of those plant relocations slow down as we get into 25 and 26. If there will be tariff restraints, that's one of the impacts. So there's going to be impacts that are going to take place based upon various initiatives of the Trump administration, not all labor, but they will have a definite impact on transactions and how these companies operate.
Another one of the things that I think we're going to see is that collective bargaining is going to continue to take a long time, because the unions are going to continue to take very hard stances. As you mentioned, increases in strike activity and taking, really aggressive stances on what their bargaining asks are. And so I think we're going to see people not getting deals as fast, and a lot of with the attention to not have the focus on expediting bargaining through Abruzzo's agenda. I think with the new incoming general counsel, they're not going to be pushing people to get deals to have those, various bargaining orders kind of thing come out. There were decisions that flipped on making, a bargaining order automatically with just one violation. I think, that case will be attacked as quickly as possible as the board can get it in front of it, to take it to test and move that law back. And so you're going to see the bargaining be much more aggressive, and the union exerting its power, which is its main power available to it, which is to take the workers out and strike. Any other thoughts on that as we wrap up our review?
Yeah, the strikes are going to continue. I still wonder whether the post-COVID era influenced a lot of those high settlements we saw in the strike activity, because if you think of it, these contracts were locked in during a period of time where we had a pandemic and a lot of the economy shut down. And then we saw people catching up as the labor market caused increases in rates and even benefit costs and the desire of the workers and the unions to go after more money as a result of sort of being stuck under collective bargaining contracts that extended through COVID in the era afterward. I still think that, like you, that because of the social unrest issues, the fact that unions have a much higher favorability, I think it's 70% now in one of the most recent surveys that I saw. The public is going to support some strikes. I don't think the Republicans will be as sort of opposed to strikes as they were in the past, or at least actively opposed. I think you're going to see that there will be some more of what we saw with the auto strike this year and the longshoreman strike, which is there's been a sort of a detente until January. We may see that pick up again. I don't think it's going to end either. What do you see happening in litigation? There's been a lot going on lately that we've seen where the actual powers of the board have been challenged in court successfully by employers throughout the country. Do you see that continuing in this next era?
I do, particularly as we were all debating it internally as to whether they were what their agenda will be when they first come in. I think it's going to be filling any vacancies on the bench. So I think as those vacancies get filled with Republican nominees, that it's likely to continue to see challenges as to the structure. I mean, eventually someone's going to have to fix it, right? Because it'll just essentially bring everything to a screeching halt. But I think you'll continue to see those things challenged. And every day we're seeing decisions actually where circuits that surprised me. There was one out of DC yesterday or recently that continue to enforce that there's an overreach on power on the ALJ benches, et cetera. So in closing, any last advice or thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with, Rick?
I think the practical thing is that we've seen so many changes with presidential administrations that have come and gone over the past 30 years of my career, at least. And I think most of our clients and most employers out there understand that there's going to be a pendulum swing. And this is not going to be new to anybody that's been in their roles of labor relations or in the legal departments of companies for more than 10 years. You've seen this happen 2 or 3 times now. The key thing for us right now is to make decisions that consider where the law is and where it might go, understanding that we have 4-year terms in the presidential administrations and things always change.
Yeah, I mean, I want to just make everybody understand that this has changed, but it's actually still the labor renaissance. I think the unions are very popular right now, and the labor movement is very aligned and much consistent with the social justice movement. And so you're going to continue to see lots of labor activity, and it'll be really interesting to see how it unfolds with them not being so aligned at the, rulemaking and lawmaking decisional level and how that really impacts it. And all I know is we'll all buckle up and see how it goes. So thanks, Rick, so much for chatting today. I look forward to seeing how the year unfolds. More to come.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you for joining us for the Year Ahead 2025 Special Edition podcast series. Please tune in to future episodes where we will continue to tell you not only what's legal, but what is effective. Our We Get Work podcast is available to stream and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as jacksonlewis.com. If you enjoyed these episodes, we encourage you to share any or all of them with your network and leave a review to help others find us. We would love to hear your suggestions for future topics, or if you're interested in being a guest on our show, please reach out to us at wegetwork@jacksonlewis.com. Thank you for tuning in.